Good morning. The plan today is to make an excursion to the beautiful Phi Phi Islands. Bit of a snag though. Allegedly, a foreign film crew recently caused some damage to the natural environment around the island, so the local authority has taken the decision to stop anyone from taking big cameras, and ours is normally yay big, round to the island. So instead, we're going to adopt the handheld approach. So sorry for the wobbles, okay? Here we go.
The Phi Phi Islands lie on the other side of the South Thai Peninsula in the Andaman Sea.
Koh Phi Phi Don is the larger of the two Phi Phi Islands, and it's the inhabited one. It's basically two great big mountainous blobs connected by a tiny sliver of sand. It's got the same mixture of backpackers' bungalows and luxury hotels as Koh Samui, but because everything is concentrated on that causeway, there are no roads, which means you walk everywhere, and it's as quiet as Venice.
The narrow, winding alleyways will lead you down to your daily sunbathing session or scuba diving lesson. But be warned, there's a bit of a scrum for accommodation when the boats arrive, so it's best to book something in advance. The smaller island, Phi Phi Lay, was the movie location for The Beach, a tale of a young traveller's search for the perfect shoreline. But the making of the film attracted some stories of its own.
Let me tell you the story of the beach. I'm standing in the very footsteps of Leonardo DiCaprio. Once upon a time, the sand came to about here. Then money changed hands, the bulldozers moved in, palm trees got planted, and the dunes got moved back up there. A movie was made. If this was the first beach I'd seen in Thailand, I'd say, wow, look at the limestone cliffs, look at the blue water, look at the luxury sand. This stuff is so soft, it's like caster sugar. But because I know that you can find better and quieter beaches elsewhere, and perhaps because I know what happened here, I don't feel very comfortable about staying.
For me, Maya Beach is now all but ruined by tourists on a misguided mass pilgrimage in Leonardo's memory. In fact, all over southern Thailand, beauty and popularity present the same contradiction.
You know, I've stood on a few Thai beaches by now, and I thought I'd pick my favourite. And then I was up in a plane and I looked out the window and I thought, I wonder if that tiny little beach down there is better still. It's easy to become a beach snob, a beach collector, on a constant conquest to find a bay where the water is bluer and warmer and the sand is whiter and softer, and where, of course, you're the only person there. And that's the paradox, isn't it? Because the more you and the world and his wife search for that perfect beach, the less likely it is still to exist.
But Thailand's not just about beaches and seaside holidays.
Modern Thailand was once, of course, old Siam, but even if your understanding of its history runs about as far as Yul Brynner in The King and I, you can still come here and appreciate the glint of the sun on a gilded temple or the inscrutable squint of a Buddha.
Scratch the surface of most cheap tourist destinations and you find 1,000 years of fascinating culture. That's very true of this place.
The ancient city of Ayutthaya, founded in 1350 by King U Thong. For 4 golden centuries, it was the capital of Thailand, one of the most important places on the planet. By the end, it had a population twice London's, and so many canals, they called it the Venice of the East.
It was a massive city, the strategic powerhouse behind Siam's plan for Pan-Asian domination. But empires inevitably fall, and sometimes they take their cities with them.
And the end came in 1767, when Burmese soldiers ransacked the place and left it in the ruins that remain here today. Meanwhile, as the jungle started to reclaim it, architects 50 miles south of here designed a copy. Bangkok.
Today, it's hard to imagine the city as it must once have been. Much of it was built of wood and burned in the fires that tore through Ayutthaya during its destruction by the Burmese, leaving stone ruins marooned in the landscape.
Each of these wats, these temples, occupies a huge area the size of a football pitch, so the only way to get around to see them all, unless you're on a coach tour, is probably to hire a bicycle or something. On the plus side, there are so many different sites that tourists are few and far between. Although whether you're lucky enough to get an entire temple to yourself like this is in the lap of the gods.
This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Anywhere else on the planet, it would be packed, but not here.
This is a weird old place, long deserted by its inhabitants. It's even been forsaken by the tourists, and you can kind of see why, really. It's a sort of place you only really visit on a school field trip. Very educational, but everything's a bit broken. And I'll tell you something else, my old school teacher would never have let me climb up steps this steep. Well, don't just stand there, get me a ladder or something.
Thailand's historic sites don't all date way back. There are some that appeal to visitors interested in more recent events.
In the Second World War, the occupying Japanese decided to join Thailand to Burma by rail. Now, the engineers said that if it could be achieved at all, this colossal task would take at least 5 years. But with Allied prisoners of war providing slave labour in impossible conditions, they drove the whole baby through in 16 months.
The speed of construction exacted a dreadful toll. 16,000 Allied prisoners of war, along with 90,000 Thais and Malays, died building the line. The Japanese believed it was more honourable to be killed in battle than endure the shame of being taken prisoner, and they treated the soldiers they captured with contempt. But for this, more might have survived.
The railway forms an unbroken link that stretches 400 kilometres up into the Burmese mountains behind me. And incredibly, if you laid end to end all the bodies of the prisoners who died in its construction, they would too.
This little stretch of the line is the focal point for visitors, yet most are surprised to learn that only 9 prisoners died building it. The bridge over the River Kwai. Some even claim that this can't be the real bridge because it's not like the one in the film. And let's face it, none of them would be here were it not for the movie.
Having seen the film, I was expecting something the size of the Forth Road Bridge crossing a gaping chasm, but actually it's just a very modest railway bridge, and that's its strength. It's the sheer ordinariness of this thing that makes it a great monument to those who died.
A very different day out is the Bang Pa Inn Summer Palace. Its sprawling landscaped gardens make it feel like a sort of Thai Versailles. The most interesting story is attached to the least imposing monument, this memorial to Queen Sunanda Kamiriratani.
In 1881, when her boat capsized in the river that runs past the palace, royal protocol dictated that the Queen be touched by none of her subjects. So, rather than risk execution for groping the royal personage, her courtiers simply swam away and left her to drown.
It takes about 45 minutes to tour the palace grounds, which you can do either on foot or by hiring one of these rather nifty and slightly presidential golf buggies.
This is the first straight-down-the-line tourist attraction I found in Thailand that isn't actually a temple. It's a little bit frustrating you can't see the interiors of the buildings inside, and the grounds have the slightly over-manicured feel of, say, Disney's Epcot Centre. But hey, what do you expect? It's a palace. It's got to be fit for a king.
One of Thailand's great draws, of course, is the weather. It's wonderfully warm across most of the country most of the time. But the drawback is the debilitating humidity.
The climate is tropical. Summer and winter don't really have any meaning here. Instead, there's a rainy season which peaks in September. The dry season, the peak season for tourism, starts before Christmas, and then it gets steadily warmer and warmer through the year until the very humid hot season. So that's 3 seasons. Think of them as a shower, an oven and a sauna.
If you're a shopper, then Thailand is definitely for you. Nearly all of the main tourist destinations have an open-air market where you can buy just about anything. The prices marked on goods are already very cheap, but the price tag is really just an invitation to haggle.
But beware, there's a huge problem here with counterfeit goods. So if someone offers you sunglasses, a CD or a watch at an unreal price, chances are it's not real. The fake, by the way, is the silver one.
Come to Thailand and chances are you'll find yourself in a bustling metropolis one day, looking at a 1,000-year-old Buddha the next, and lying on a beach the day after that. So if it's impossible to sum up a holiday in Thailand in one sentence, what can you say?
Well, it's hot, it's exotic, it's friendly, and once you get here it's pretty inexpensive too. Beyond that, I can't really find words to draw together places as disparate as Bangkok and here, Koh Phangan. One seemed like the centre of civilization. This feels more like the remotest place I've ever stood on the planet. In fact, if the tide carries on coming in like this, it soon will be. I don't relax terribly well as a person, but I can tell you this. After 2 weeks in Thailand, I'm now feeling so laid back, I'm going home on a stretcher.